Frontline is a presentation of the Documentary Consortium.
In Los Angeles today, federal prosecutors introduced this videotape. It is evidence, they say, of cops stealing drug money. 7 sheriff's deputies are now on trial in Los Angeles, charged with stealing $1.4 million in drug money. More than 30 narcotics officers here have been implicated in the largest current police corruption scandal in the country.
Everybody must have known about it. Everybody must have been in on it. And you can sure imagine that Sobel would like it to look that way because he's so dirty. He wants everybody to be dirty.
Tonight on Frontline, the story behind that LA scandal. How the war on drugs is corrupting America's cops.
Officers go into hotel rooms and find millions of dollars. Literally, that's tremendous temptation.
The FBI calls drugs and drug money the #1 threat to police integrity.
Anyone who says, I've never had that problem in my police department should add the operative word, yet.
Tonight, when cops go bad.
With funding provided by the financial support of viewers like you. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is Frontline.
One summer day in 1985, a fishing boat called the Mary C slowly made its way up the Miami River. It was loaded with $12 million worth of cocaine. In the 1970s, the Miami River became a major port for smugglers importing large quantities of cocaine and marijuana into the United States. From the Atlantic Ocean through the city of Miami, the river is congested with boats from all over the world. It is a natural place for smugglers to secretly unload illegal drugs. Three miles up the river, the Mary C docked here at the Jones Boatyard. That night, 6 men started to offload the cocaine into a waiting van. At 2 o'clock in the morning, something went wrong.
In July 29th, 1985, I was assigned to the Homicide Bureau on a special squad known as Syntac 26. Our function was to investigate drug-related murders in the Dade County area. On that afternoon, we were dispatched to the Miami River where 3 bodies were observed floating.
On the bodies, detectives discovered beepers, money, and guns. They suspected it was just another drug deal gone bad. But the investigation quickly took an unexpected turn. The night watchman told detectives that a dozen policemen had raided the boat the night before, and the smugglers had jumped overboard in a panic.
They were afraid either from arrest or several of the witnesses, or actually one witness even testified that the officers had their weapons drawn and were yelling, kill him, as they approached. Fearing for their life and their safety, they jumped into the water.
But when detectives went looking for a police report on the nighttime raid, they couldn't find one. Then a witness told them that 400 kilograms of cocaine had been aboard. It was now missing. The suspects in the case were now the cops.
It was obviously very scary feeling to find out that there was police officers involved. That was the last thing in any of us' mind when we started investigating this case.
The officers under investigation were all recent recruits of the Miami Police Department. Mike Exposito, head of internal affairs, worked with them.
Well, you have all types. You have a person like Rudy Arias, who was a hardworking policeman. Estrada was another one that was a hardworking policeman. You had your others that weren't as hardworking and were arrogant. your Osvaldo Cuellos. Some of them are very nice people, personally. I mean, you talk to them and you say, boy, this is an outstanding young man if you don't know them. And others are people that, you say, this person is a policeman.
The way this group began was first they started by stopping people who looked like drug dealers, stopping them in their police cars, pulling them over, asking them for identification, searching their car for cash and or large amounts of cash and drugs. And if they would find any of those two things, they would eventually steal them and sell them or keep the cash.
The cops all worked the night shift in the Little Havana section of Miami. They paid off the owner of a local bar to identify drug dealers for them to shake down. But they wanted to make more money, and so they went to the Miami River and began to rip off entire boatloads of cocaine.
Depending on what activity or what incident they were involved in, we estimate that the most that any of the officers made was $2 million, and the least that any officer made was slightly over $100,000. So it varied between $100,000 and $2 million per officer.
They got away with a lot, not just beginning in 1985, but from years back, starting from the early 80s, this was going on.
Clarence Dixon had just been appointed chief of police.
But this time there was a slip-up. People got killed, and they left shreddings of evidence all over the place.
The case of the Miami River cops would quickly become one of the biggest and most violent cases in the annals of police corruption. 15 officers were initially arrested, convicted, and sentenced to prison for up to 35 years. The FBI entered the case. The investigation of corruption widened, and eventually, 80 police officers would be arrested, convicted, or disciplined. At least 10% of the Miami Police Department was corrupt. And one of the original Miami River cops, Armando Garcia, is still at large today, one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives.
You were not surprised?
No one was surprised.
Richard Witt was director of training for the Miami Police.
We recognized that many of them lacked good basic education. We recognized that many of them lacked good basic communication skills. We recognized that few of them had any personal discipline. Our reference to them as time bombs was exactly that. Sooner or later, they're going to go off. We just don't know which of them are time bombs or when they're set to go off.
Most of the corrupt cops were among hundreds of new recruits who had been hired to combat an astronomical increase in violent crime. By 1980, Miami had the highest rates of drug traffic and murder in the nation. But the police had not hired a new recruit in 5 years. So when the city finally decided to beef up the department, 600 new officers were quickly hired, doubling the size of the force in less than 2 years.
We ended up scraping the bottom of the barrel to do that, to accomplish what our chief at that time committed us to.
More than one of them had backgrounds for having been gang members while in high schools. More than one of them had been identified as a former by a former employer as having committed theft and other kinds of larceny.
It peaked and ripened and burst like a blister all over us, and it contaminated everyone in the police department, the good guys and the bad.
The Miami River Cops scandal also sounded an ominous warning for the rest of the nation. As illegal drugs spread across the country, the potential for police corruption would not be far behind.
Los Angeles
Southern California is a distribution point for narcotics, cocaine in the United States. And Washington, hey, Washington, listen to us. We need your help. We need your help.
In September of 1989, federal agents in Los Angeles seized 22 tons of cocaine and more than $12 million in cash. It was the largest single drug seizure ever. With this discovery, Los Angeles passed Miami and became the drug trafficking capital of the United States. Daryl Gates is the chief of the Los Angeles Police.
I look back 40 years ago and compare it to what we are faced with today and what the police officers faced with today, and it's a total, complete change. It's tougher out there, much more difficult, more crime, more violence, more guns, more dope.
Sheriff's Department, we have a search warrant. Open the door, get your hands up. Pick. They're heading for the bathroom. Set it, get your hands up, get your hands up. Yeah, two in the kitchen, Hold on, don't go in there, Okay. Just hold the people in the kitchen. Is there anybody outside we have to deal with?
So what it means is that each year we're arresting over 50,000 people for drug offenses. For years we were seizing over 7 to 8 tons of cocaine in the city, large amounts of other kinds of narcotics, and that makes a lot of work for a police department, and a lot of social disintegration of a city that should be, as its name implies, the city of the angels.
Despite the record seizures of cocaine on the streets of Los Angeles, police here estimate that they stop only 10% of the illegal drug traffic. Drugs are the #1 problem for the region's two main law enforcement agencies, the Los Angeles Police and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. This is one of 20 squads of sheriff's deputies assigned full-time to stopping illegal drugs. They routinely set up drug deals, often based on nothing more than a tip.
Eddie, buy souvenir. You know what I need? I need a Tony Black. Okay. I'm Pollo Loco, man, right now. Fernando, whoever the hell he is. I mean, if he's as big sounding as his voice is, man, I mean, this guy's going to be 8 foot tall.
They work out of a trailer behind the Lenox Station in south central Los Angeles, the heart of gang territory. The squad concentrates on low-level street dealers who sell small amounts of cocaine and heroin. Their strategy is to demonstrate a commitment to the community by busting as many dealers as possible in high-visibility arrests. The pressure is never routine.
You all ready? I can't tell if he's got the hat off or not. There's Chris walking. No, he hasn't got the hat. I'll give you the go. There's nothing. Go. Hands up! Go! Get the car! Get the car! Get the car! Slam it in the car, Brian!
I ran all the way over here with him.
I couldn't see if you guys were going to see the high sign or not, man. I took the hat off and I'm putting it on a car, man. This guy's going, nah, something ain't right, man. This guy knew it was up right away. There you go. You got your 20 of heroin and your 20 of powder cocaine.
A second strategy developed in the mid-1980s as the Sheriff's Department began discovering large amounts of drugs and money. 500 pounds of cocaine or $500,000 in cash were not uncommon seizures. So the Sheriff's Department formed an elite squad of detectives to go after major drug dealers. They called themselves the Majors. They were the best of cops. Cops like Dan Garner.
Look for certain cars coming out of certain areas, you know, businesses. that you know are associated with drug activity and profile those people, follow them, and do a workup on them.
Garner's partner was Jim Bowder.
But after a period of time, I think most of us had a pretty good knack for, you know, when the guy was up to something really wrong and when it was just regular activity. And that was kind of the trick, I would say, Dan, wouldn't you?
Dan Garner had been a deputy sheriff for more than a dozen years when he joined the Majors Squad. He is a Vietnam veteran and the father of 2 sons. For deputies like Garner, the Majors was a prized job.
It's a little like hunting. I mean, you bag your game on your skill. I mean, you track it, you watch it. You got to know when to pull the trigger and when not to pull the trigger, and it's exciting.
Jim Bowder's father was also a cop. After 7 years as a deputy, he joined the Majors in 1987.
For me, I think it wasn't the same job every day. Every night you get in a radio car and you had no idea what was going to happen, and some nights were kind of boring and other nights were really exciting. And I think that's the lure for me more than anything else.
The Majors Squad's got results. This is one of their seizures. Finding $500,000 in a room was not unusual. $4 million was their largest single cash seizure.
What you'd do is you'd find the money, and in our case, our sergeant, you'd point the money out to him, and he'd get the seizure bags that he had in his car at all times, and we'd take that money, and it depended how he handled it. Sometimes we'd just throw the money in his car, and he'd later bag it up, and sometimes he'd bag it right there. And so they'd take those bundles, and they'd throw them in the bag, and they'd do what they call a bundle count. Just they'd guess, this looks like $10,000 in hundreds, and we'd do a bundle count, and we'd seal that bag up, and that money would be retained by our sergeant and ultimately placed in the safe at our headquarters. And on some future day, a forfeiture crew would count the money.
The counts were constantly off because if you count that large amount of money 5 times in this room today, I bet we'll get 5 different counts. And we've even taken money to the banks, and they have to count it 3 and 4 times to get it. So after a while, I mean, the discrepancy over or below doesn't surprise you.
This is just a...
In 1987, the Sheriff's Department seized more than $26 million in drug money. Another $33 million in 1988. Cash seizures became the focus of Garner and Bowder's team.
You see that there's big money out there. You want to seize the big money for your department. For our unit, that was a sign of whether you were doing good or poorly, was how much money you seized and the kind of cases you did. And my supervisor made it extremely clear that big money cases were a lot more favorable for your overall evaluation than big dope cases.
Jim Walsh worked closely with the Majors. He is the chief federal prosecutor for drug cases in Los Angeles.
These people that go out and they go into hotel rooms and find millions of dollars, literally, I can think of a dozen occasions where officers have confronted $1 million or more dollars, and who's going to miss it? That's tremendous temptation. And it seems like everybody's making a lot of money except them, and they're the guys who are taking the risks and chances. I don't offer any of this by way of excuse or explanation for cops who yield to the temptation, but it's part of the picture. You wanted to know about pressures? That's part of the pressure, I think. The pressure of a guy trying to put a couple of kids through college on a policeman's salary, having to have his nose rubbed in it. It's a dirty business all the way. It's a dirty and a corrupting business all the way around. No matter who touches it, gets dirtied up a little bit by it.
One morning in September of last year, in a suburban neighborhood an hour south of Los Angeles, a dozen cars suddenly pulled up to this house. It was Dan Garner's house.
I'd gotten up and went to work that morning early. We were supposed to meet in Downey on the surveillance, and I was beeped by my wife. And she called me and says, she was at work at that point in time, and says, my son had called and that the FBI and the IRS and all the cops in the world are at our house, have surrounded our house.
Armed with a search warrant, the agents were looking for money, financial records, or anything else that might link Garner to the theft of over $1 million in drug money.
Basically, you're numb. You don't know what's happening, and there was, it's a conservative estimate, 10 to 12 people there, and they're tearing everything out of your drawers and out of your house and your clothes and your cars and everything, and they took my work car and took everything out of it and spread it up and down the street. And yeah, it's one thing that stands out in my mind. I was standing in the hallway of my house, and the FBI guy was telling me, he says, "I'm going to put you away in prison for 50 years. And I looked at the pictures of my kids on the wall, and I remember me lecturing them, and I was pretty sad.
A stinging rebuke today for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. A long investigation into drug money skimming culminated today in more than a dozen criminal indictments.
Garner was not alone. In February, his entire squad was indicted on charges of theft, conspiracy, and the laundering of more than $1.4 million. According to the indictment, the deputies skimmed large amounts of seized drug money before turning it into the department. Then they allegedly divided it among themselves and bought boats, swimming pools, vacation homes, and helicopter lessons. Dan Garner is specifically accused of stealing more than $75,000. He allegedly told another deputy, "I can make you rich." Jim Bowder is accused of skimming almost $200,000, investing some of the money in a horse racing syndicate. According to the indictment, one deputy joked, "Here's your Christmas bonus." And another said, "I stole so much it scared me." Since February, 16 more deputies have been suspended in the corruption investigation. More indictments are expected soon. It is currently the largest investigation of police corruption in the country.
They claim you were stealing money.
That's correct.
And were you?
No.
Garner and Bowder maintain their innocence. They agreed to talk to Frontline only under conditions set by their lawyers. They would not answer any specific questions about the case, but could talk about their work and the impact of the indictments.
And of course, no information was really forthcoming other than you were suspended and allegations of theft were in the air. And it was really tough. And since that time, I still have bouts of, being nervous and not being able to sleep, but generally I've just accepted my circumstances and have resolved myself to fight my way out of them.
The government's chief witness against Bowder and Garner will be their supervisor, Sergeant Robert Sobel. Sobel has already pled guilty to conspiracy and tax evasion. In a statement, Sobel said currency skimming was the practice, not a rarity. His lawyer told Frontline that Sobel regrets his crimes, and he will cooperate fully with the prosecutors. After his arraignment, Garner said no money was missing. If anything, it was simply miscounted, and he was just doing his job.
That was our sole purpose, to seize money for Sherman Block. And we went in and did what we did many times, and now everybody's acting like it's a very unusual incident.
Sherman Block is the sheriff of Los Angeles County.
I think we had individuals who succumbed to temptation, who somehow, I'm sure, in their own minds, they probably were able to rationalize what they were doing was not really wrong, since the individuals who they were dealing with were not honorable people in themselves. If an individual is exposed to large amounts or small amounts, should not cause them to suddenly become dishonest because the price is right. I just can't accept that.
Now, I know there have been difficulties. I read the papers, and I've seen the stories this past week about the indictments here. Some bad apple turns up, an officer abuses your trust or ours by doing wrong.
10 days after the indictments, President Bush spoke before an assembly of sheriff's deputies and Los Angeles police.
Don't let it get you down. Keep your heads high.
Well, I personally don't care what George Bush says or Sherman Block says or anybody says, for that matter. I know the kind of individual I am and the kind of deputy sheriff I have been. I'm very proud of my participation on the sheriff's department. I think, and I'm very proud of myself individually, and I don't have anything to be ashamed of.
All the major squads have now been disbanded, and seizures of drug money by the sheriff's department have dropped by 60%. Jim Bowder and Dan Garner were dismissed from the force. Last week, they went to trial on charges that could send them to prison for over 50 years. Part of their defense will focus on the sheriff's department's drug money policy. Harlan Braun is Dan Garner's attorney.
That's a real good question. Statistically, when you start parading officers through rooms of money, you're asking for it. And a system that's been created this way with this type of laws is asking for trouble.
The sheriff's department seized almost $100 million in drug money in the last 3 years. Asset forfeiture laws allow the department to keep a percentage of the cash for its own use. Critics argue that when narcotics officers become revenue producers, the system itself becomes corrupt.
Well, what they were doing was once you focus on cash as the goal for the officers accept that, and they therefore, what they do is they forget about the ultimate goal is eliminating dope dealers. So this was simply a revenue-raising device for the sheriff's department and for law enforcement, and it diverted the officers' attention to the real goal, which was stopping dope.
At times, the sheriff's department chose not to arrest suspects who were caught with large amounts of money.
We seized, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 from a guy, have him sign a disclaimer form that says he has no knowledge of that money, doesn't know how he came into possession of it. You take some basic information from him, and in the wind he goes. You file that or return that money to the department. They initiate a forfeiture action, and then you go on to the next money case.
In the disclaimer form, the suspect states that he is not the owner of the seized money and that he will not attempt to claim it. The forms were used by the sheriff's department in investigations where money was seized, but no drugs were found. The purpose, according to this department memo, was to assist the department in gaining permanent legal possession of the money.
If I've told my neighbors, I says, yeah, we follow guys all around all the time, seize $500,000 from them in cash, they sign a waiver that says it's not their money, we let them go and take less information we put on a regular traffic ticket, and don't arrest them and don't prosecute them, most people go, no, that's not true. You're kidding. That doesn't happen. But that's what we routinely did.
They rationalize it by saying taking money away from the dope dealers is hurting the dope dealers, but all it is taxing them. It's just a tax. The money that they seize may be a lot of money, but it's certainly not putting dope dealers out of business.
The department no longer uses the disclaimer forms, but the sheriff defends their original purpose.
The more of that profit that you can take away, either in seizure of currency or other assets that they've gained, the more you're going to hurt them. If we as an organization benefit in the process because we get some of that money to assist us with our own budgetary needs, then that's kind of icing on the cake.
Well, I don't want to criticize the sheriff's department, but I think all of us had a weak point. The administration of the city decided to put asset forfeiture seizures in our budget, of all things. That meant we're supposed to make a certain level of cash seizures in order to make our budget. That's crazy. I objected to that right from the very beginning. I still object to it. I think it's almost, it's close to being as unethical and as immoral as you can get. But I think a lot of people were faced with that. Clearly, to the extent the sheriff or any of us emphasized that it was wrong and could have had a great deal of it could have been a big part of the reason why what happened, but you still get back to the fundamental issue. You had a crooked cop that made a decision to go crooked.
Police corruption in Los Angeles has spread beyond the sheriff's department. The investigation has widened and is now expected to include members of the Los Angeles Police Department. And another investigation in Los Angeles has focused on federal drug agents. This is the view from Darnell Garcia's house. For 10 years, Garcia was an agent for the Drug Enforcement Administration. He allegedly spent millions of dollars traveling around the world first class and living in this exclusive suburb of Los Angeles. Garcia worked with another DEA agent, Wayne Countryman, who lived here. Along with a third agent, John Jackson, they are accused of stealing hundreds of kilograms of cocaine and heroin and then laundering their profits through 2 local banks and transferring millions of dollars to secret accounts in Switzerland. According to the indictment, they stole 150 kilograms of heroin from DEA headquarters in Los Angeles and sent the drugs to dealers in New York by Federal Express. This summer in Los Angeles, 2 of the agents pled guilty to drug trafficking and money laundering. The third will go on trial next week in the same courthouse where the trial of the sheriff's deputies is already underway.
It was the most depressing thing that I've had to deal with since I've been here. I know a number of, I don't know all the sheriff's officers, but I know some of them. I worked with some of them. I've worked cases with them. With the DEA agents, I work with all 3 of them and put them on the witness stand. I've taken testimony from them. I've offered their testimony as true and credible in courts. And to find out that that some of the people that you spent that kind of time with have, according to the allegations, unproven at this point, that they may have been involved in other activities. Breaks your heart.
Good cops, these guys.
So everybody thought.
In Washington, the FBI tracks police corruption cases nationwide and have found that 59% of them are drug-related. They also see a pattern in how good cops go bad.
A lot of them tell a story that's somewhat shocking, that they came in to be a law enforcement officer with the best of intentions, and that they saw the world as right and wrong. And then they became part of a system that they saw those around them bending the rules, and taking money. And then after a while, they found themselves, at first they tried to buck the system, and then all of a sudden they were part of the system.
There is nothing in the world that's incorruptible except personal character that will not be corrupted.
Ed Delatry consults with the FBI about ethics in policing.
It is a slippery slope. Once you put yourself outside the law, it tends to be corrosive of your respect for the law. So today it's a search that goes a little too far. Then it's a false report to cover up the fact that the search went a little too far. Then it's perjured testimony in a trial in order to get the conviction and to safeguard the false report and to protect yourself from the fact that you went farther than you had any right to in the first place. And then perhaps it becomes a case of skimming a little of the drug dealer's money in order to buy something that the department needs. And once you begin to skim the money, it's not hard to go from there to, well, we'll take a few dollars just for us.
Is the line ready? The line is ready.
I want to go just like this. I really want to go just like this.
This is the training facility at Quantico, Virginia, for DEA and FBI agents. Before they get here, background checks by the FBI are intended to weed out any recruits who might become corrupt, but a few slip through. The DEA, which has 3,000 agents, has started 32 internal corruption investigations this year. In fact, every federal law enforcement agency has had agents involved in drug-related corruption. Of the more than 400 cases of police corruption the FBI is currently tracking nationwide, 54 involved federal agents, 49 state police, and 327 local cops.
My point is that there are lots and lots of people in policing who deserve to be trusted and who will be trustworthy until the end, for whom it is commonplace to say of these excesses you and I are discussing, we don't do that here. Does that mean that there's not a problem to worry about? No. There is a very serious problem to worry about. The temptations toward wrongdoing, either for personal gain or for some real or imagined noble cause, are very great.
While experts are concerned about the growing national problem of police corruption, they are particularly worried about its impact in the small towns of America. Richard Witt, who worked for the Miami Police Department during its corruption scandal, is now chief of police in Hollywood, Florida. But even here, he has had to deal with corruption on his force.
Anyone who says, I've never had that problem in my police department, should add the operative word, yet. Because it is a matter of when.
Seagirt is a resort town on the New Jersey shore, whose population of 2,500 doubles in the summertime. Seagirt is small, just 1 square mile. It is affluent, quiet, respectable, and proud. There is a close relationship between the people of Seagirt and its 12-member police department. Almost all the residents know the officers personally. The chief is Robert Jewell. Everybody calls him Biff. He personally responds to traffic accidents and drives patrol through the town. His is one of 17,000 local police departments in the United States. This past spring, Chief Jewell received a phone call early one morning.
When I got a call from one of the fellows up at the prosecutor's office to come on over to the camp. They were holding a sting operation there. So I go on over to the camp, and I've seen sting operations before. I figured, well, it's in Seagirt. Maybe they want us over there to back up or help them. I go in there, and I talk to my friend over there, and he says, no, we just arrested 2 of your people, the lieutenant and the sergeant. So, geez, they got them on the drug sting operation. And we're investigating another one, your captain. Right? So that's how I found out about it.
State police arrested more than 20 local people for allegedly operating a $500,000 drug ring, which was distributing cocaine and marijuana. The 3 Seagirt police officers were accused of selling drugs and protecting the ring. Arrested were Joseph Beaumont, a sergeant with 12 years' experience with the department. Lieutenant Robert Hindman, a 13-year veteran, and Captain Guy Cavallari, 11 years on the force and the father of 3 children. The accusations include charges that the ring brought a pound of cocaine into Seagirt each week, and that the police were selling drugs out of their squad cars.
I was shocked. Unbelievable. I mean, it felt as though the whole world was... Come on, what can you say? It's beyond words. Unbelievable.
I see another hand.
At the town hall, residents crowded into an emergency meeting to discuss the scandal.
Fortunately, it looks like we had some trusted members of our department who violated their oath, violated their badge, and certainly violated your confidence in them.
William McGinnis is the mayor of Seagirt.
I was absolutely shocked. I couldn't believe that this was going to happen here. I had never dreamed of such a thing occurring, and I was speechless. I was dumbfounded. I thought they were really, somebody was pulling some sort of a very warped joke.
The town was particularly worried about the impact of the scandal on its children. 2 of the officers regularly spoke to classes about the dangers of drug use.
The one question that did come up in every classroom was, who do we trust now?
Joan Calhoun is the mother of 2 and president of the school board.
Sad, more than anything else, to watch the children's reaction, because they do believe that the policemen were someone that you could trust.
All of a sudden, the curtain opened up and there was the big picture staring them in the face. Men who they had great respect for were all of a sudden fallen and were no better than the people that they had heard about getting involved in this terrible thing. And there it was, right in front of them. Their own heroes in some case, their own friends, the people they had respect for, these people who they never would have expected this from. I think it shocked a lot of young people into realizing, oh, this is something that I have to think more about.
Most people here were close to the arrested officers and trusted them not only as cops, but as friends. Many people were reluctant to talk with us about the scandal, afraid that something they might say would hurt their town even more.
This particular thing, this drug, this insidious disease called narcotics, no one thought it would reach into this town and just tear its police department apart. No one thought that.
It has now been 5 years since the Miami River Cop scandal broke. With the years of arrests and trials now behind them, Miami's confidence in its police has grown. For the department, the lessons were hard-earned but clear. Good cops must have the right values.
I mean, they got to believe in something. They got to believe that this job is sacred, that people has placed their trust in me. They depend on me. Honest people depend on me to get a job done, and no one else can do that but me. I'm the one of 1 billion people on earth. I'm here in this little spot, and I'm responsible for these people.
Look at the wood over here. Bag. Him and another person came up and they said they wanted to see my bag, and they grabbed it from me. He said he had a knife, and he took my stuff, and then he took a bunch of brand new stuff, and that's how he just threw it and chased them all around.
Where's the knife? Where's the knife?
I ain't got a knife, sir. I never had no knife, sir. I was my right-handed guy. I had a knife, sir.
This is my responsibility because people have given me this responsibility. They trust me. This is the faith that they have put in me and this badge. Those things have to be reinforced. There's nothing to replace that.
In the wake of the Miami scandal, the Justice Department commissioned a nationwide study, which concluded that tougher recruitment standards and reinforcing values were the keys to stopping police corruption.
If you have corruption, a basic part of your system, your organizational system, has already failed. We think when we ferret out corruption that we are doing a good thing. Well, we are certainly doing a good thing, but we've missed the boat in the first 2 areas. We haven't recruited good people, or if we have, we haven't sustained high integrity in those people. We've helped them to fail.
We are reminded as law enforcement officers we must be constantly mindful.
In Miami, the officers themselves joined the drive for higher standards by voluntarily submitting to random drug tests. So far this year, no Miami police officer has tested positive. The department credits its tough recruiting guidelines.
Just in our hiring process, we have a zero tolerance, which is unheard of around the country. Zero tolerance. If you smoked 1 marijuana cigarette before you came here and applied for a job, you're not going to get on with this police department.
Despite their tough stand on drug use, the department can only remain hopeful that these new standards will actually stop police corruption. For the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, the recruitment challenge is even greater. They hire new deputies from across the United States by advertising their strong reputation and the lure of Southern California.
Look at that mountain. Look at those trees. Look at that bum over there, man. He's down on his knees. Look at these women. Ain't nothing like them.
3 times each month, all year long, hundreds of applicants arrive in Los Angeles to take the written intelligence test. The Sheriff's Department says it is looking for high school graduates who want to help people and put something of themselves back into the community. Starting pay is $28,000. Last year, despite the corruption scandal, the department had more than 30,000 applicants for under 1,000 deputy sheriff positions. 10,000 actually showed up to take the exam. Half of them failed.
You all failed the written portion of the examination. On top of this card here, you will see the number 1 or the number 2.
Next, a short personal interview weeds out another 1,000 applicants. The questions here focus on any past criminal activity, especially drug use.
As far as your narcotic use, you've got down one-time marijuana use.
Yes.
How about cocaine?
No.
Barbiturates? Amphetamines?
Most police recruiters see any past drug use as a serious problem. They say it represents a flagrant disregard for the law. So hiring former drug users as cops is risky. Captain Michael Nagaoka was in charge of recruiting.
How many applicants do you find who have experimented with drugs?
I think if I were to give a percentage, it would be much better, because what we're probably talking about is for the calendar year of 1989, we processed over 32,000 applicants. We were probably looking at 60 to 65% that have had some use or experimentation with drugs to some degree.
And where do you draw the line?
The line is drawn, and it's a determination that is made by the department in regards to, we do allow a certain amount of experimentation.
The Justice Department's study of police corruption calculated that nationwide, 64% of police applicants admitted to experimenting with drugs, primarily marijuana and cocaine. The study concluded that many agencies had no choice but to hire former drug abusers.
I think that you can hire, and I don't recommend this, don't misunderstand, I don't recommend hiring prior drug abusers. But I think there are certain categories of prior drug abusers that can be hired with a reduced risk if a department has the time to pay attention to building and reinforcing values. Once again, this has been a perilous period, because we've had to recruit from this group of young people who grew up in a nation that had not said no to drugs. As a matter of fact, had tacitly said yes to drugs. And that has made our job even more difficult, not just in finding the right individuals, but then after getting them, making sure that they understood that they were in a different environment, no longer in the environment of other people. They were Los Angeles police officers, and that's a different environment. And as a Los Angeles police officer, you simply don't do the things that you might have done as a private citizen out there. You wear a badge, and it's the LAPD badge, and that's got to mean something to you. And if it doesn't, then get the hell out of here.
Any member of your immediate family ever been arrested on a felony charge?
No, not that I know of.
The biggest challenge for recruiters is how to determine which applicants have the character and integrity to become good cops. At the Sheriff's Department, investigators probe for any signs of dishonesty.
Your honesty is going to be of the utmost importance here, okay? Because if you are in any way deceptive on the polygraph, it will greatly harm your chance of becoming a deputy sheriff. You know, a lot of kids come in here and they think that they can bluff their way through this whole thing. At one time they could, but now that we are giving polygraphs to everyone, it's very difficult to beat the system.
To double-check his honesty, a lie detector test is now mandatory for each applicant.
That bothers him.
Maybe minimizing it.
I was kind of thinking when I came out of there that I thought he was going to say, when I asked him what question bothered him the most, I was thinking he was going to say the drinking. We'll see.
When you think about policing, what do you need? You need people who have very good judgment, who can respond to situations of great need, can respond to cataclysm, accident, disaster, as well as predatory threats to the public safety from criminals or would-be criminals. You also need people of extremely good character, people who can be trusted when the chips are down. trusted not only in terms of honesty, but in terms of fortitude, restraint, respect for the law, and a sense of justice toward the public.
After a process that lasts more than 6 months, less than 3% of the original 30,000 applicants are finally selected as cadets. The department hopes that their system of interrogation, polygraphs, and extensive background checks has isolated those men and women who are competent to hold the public trust.
Ladies and gentlemen, you rose as cadets. You may now be seated as peace officers of the state of California.
Your recruiting is never going to be perfect. You're going to get people who are essentially sound, whose character is basically good, whose judgment is pretty good, and who yet, in the face of all the demands of policing over time, are going to go wrong for one reason or another.
By summer, the turmoil over the police scandal in Seagirt, New Jersey, had begun to ease, and the town started to rebuild its police department.
Once again, welcome on board. Thank you very much. The official swearing in. As you know, Patrolman Nesbitt is one of the bright young policemen that we brought on board to hopefully upgrade our department. All right, repeat after me. I, Douglas Marshall Nesbitt.
This July, the town hired its first new officer and promoted a patrolman to sergeant.
One more.
The police chief says he has tried to improve the background checks of new recruits. And the mayor says he now expects each officer to voluntarily submit to drug testing once a year.
State your name.
In August, Lieutenant Hindman pled guilty to distributing drugs and described in court how he had bought marijuana from his captain.
Tell the court about it, please.
The last time that I bought some from him, he bought a quarter pound of marijuana into headquarters and used the headquarters scale. And right in our office, it was his and mine combined. I purchased 1 ounce of marijuana from him in March of '90.
You purchased 1 ounce of marijuana out of the quarter pound of marijuana that Captain Cavalieri handled?
Yes, sir.
Were you on duty at that time?
I believe I was.
Hindman could receive a prison sentence of up to 5 years. Sergeant Beaumont and Captain Cavalieri are both out on bail. They are expected to be formally indicted soon for conspiracy to distribute drugs.
Well, this town, surprisingly enough, and the council got behind the men here 100%. We had hundreds of letters saying, we know it's not your fault. The men, we have faith in the men still here. We're all behind you. Anything you need, you let us know. It's been very good.
It's more open now. It's people are willing to talk about it. People are willing to say that Seagirt does not sit there just because this little 1 square mile town who's blocked off by a highway and the ocean on one side. You know, life does not go in the fast lane past us. We are part of it. It's here. Don't deny it.
Only after such a situation occurs does the community become aware that police corruption and police integrity are important to the community. I mean, these are things that people don't pay attention to until something adverse occurs. And that, to me, is really extraordinary. If the criminal justice system doesn't work effectively, then no other system of government can work effectively.
You can be anywhere in the world. Just change the address. They're all the same. And I think, if anything, it's taught the people in the town that what we thought was once just a quiet, secure little oceanfront community, we're part of the big world now. It's here. And you better accept that.
Funding for Frontline is provided by the financial support of viewers like you and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Frontline is produced for the Documentary Consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. For videocassette information about this program, please write to this address.
This is PBS. Next time on Frontline, the story of a manhunt. The target, Howard Marks, an Oxford-educated drug dealer who eluded police around the world. The hunter, an obsessed DEA agent who refused to give up.
Listening to these voices was like listening to the heart of organized crime.
Frontline investigates the dark world of an international drug ring in the hunt for Howard Marks.
For a printed transcript of this or any Frontline program, send $5 to Journal Graphics Incorporated, 267 Broadway, New York, 10007. To order by credit card, call 212-227-READ.